So welcome to the Planning and Conservation League's 2023 California Environmental Assembly, and this is the third day of our virtual sessions. My name is Howard Penn, and I'm the Executive Director of PCL. Our focus this year is on extreme measures for extreme times. Over the past 2 weeks, we explored the importance of solving our climate crisis. And for those of you that haven't joined us in the past, since 1965, PCL has worked on statewide environmental policy and focuses on land use, transportation, water, energy, wildlife, and their ecosystems, and environmental laws such as CEQA, as well as a whole host of a number of other topics. We combine these areas of priority to reduce the impacts and contributors to the climate crisis. This is a massive job, and we appreciate your support, participation, and engagement in any way possible. So let's get started. Today we have, there are going to be 3 sessions, and we're pleased to have you join us today for a great panel of presentations and discussions throughout this morning and a little bit into this afternoon. We have 3 sessions today. Usually we have 2. The first one's going to be, can modular nuclear reactors help save the planet? That's from 9 to 10:30. We have wildfire evacuation planning and project siting and design, just from 10:45 to 12:15. And then we have AB 2438 and beyond, bringing California's transportation spending into alignment with our climate and equity goals. That's from 12:30 to 2. So let me go over a little bit of helpful information for our sessions today. There will be all 3 of these. 15-minute break between each. You're able to join them using the same Zoom link, and you're welcome to attend as many sessions over this week and today and next week as you would like. That 15-minute break between each session, you can stay on the Zoom link, or you can log out and log back in using the same link, whatever your preference may be. There will be a Q&A period at the end of each session, so if you would like to participate, please enter your questions in the Q&A feature. We'd like to reserve the chat box for comments and keep all the questions in the Q&A box. These sessions are being recorded, and a link to those recordings and the presented material would be emailed to you soon after the session, or you can find them at pcl.org/registrantinfo. And our wonderful event coordinator, Johnny, will drop that link into the chat box right now, so you have that. There will be a feedback form once you leave this session. Please fill those out to let us know your thoughts. It's very helpful to have your feedback for our planning for future sessions and for next year's assembly. So please, if you can, take the time to fill that out. If you have any questions, please contact events@pcl.org. And if you'd like to support PCL's assembly and our work in general, please consider donating at pcl.org. pcl.org/donate. Thank you. I want to give a big thank you to all our sponsors. We couldn't do this without you, and a special thank you to our gold and silver sponsors, Chatton Brown, Carstens and Minter, LLP, National Wildlife Federation, Sage Sweetword, and Shoot Mahali and Weinberger, LLP. Okay, let's get going with our first session. Can modular nuclear reactors help save the planet? I want to thank and introduce the moderator, Todd Allmendinger, Director of Consulting and Research at Clean Tech Group. Todd leads the research and consulting for Clean Tech Group, as well as being co-founder of the Innovation Partners, Clean Tech Group's parent company. Todd has been a consultant for over 20 years and has been specifically working in clean tech consulting for the past 16. His current focus is on helping corporations and organizations develop and implement strategies for engaging innovation. All right, it's all yours. Take it away, Todd.
Sure. One of the things to point out is our focus is around sustainability, climate, and it's really about innovation. And when we were talking about this originally about nuclear, we consider nuclear an important part of the decarbonization and energy transition. So I think this is a really interesting discussion and a critical discussion going forward. And that makes it pretty easy to introduce both our first and second speaker, Christine King. Our original speaker, Alice Campanati, was not able to join us, and she was going to be representing the DOE and their view on nuclear. Fortunately, Christine comes from the Idaho National Laboratory, and she's the director of Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. So those 2 keywords there, innovation and nuclear, are some of the key things we're going to be talking about today. Turn over to Christine to provide some background. Christine 1 will take the DOE point of view, and Christine 2 will make the bridge from there.
Thank you so very much. Alice is disappointed that she can't be here today. Unfortunately, she's had a death in the family. So we send our thoughts to Alice for a peaceful few days here. Johnny, if you want to go ahead and bring up the slides, that would be great. So what I want to talk about on Alice's behalf, first of all, is, so Alice is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Reactor Fleet of Advanced Reactor Deployment, specifically in the Office of Nuclear Energy. And Alice personally is both her and her husband have installed much solar capacity at their home, personally designed and personally installed by them. So she not only works in nuclear, but also is personally concerned about the climate and excited to be working in the space of energy such that she can put her personal talents towards the energy transition. Today, we're going to talk about what we in the Department of Energy, how we think about new nuclear, and especially why we think it's a critical part to our to the equations going forward in terms of reaching a clean economy. If we could go to the next slide. So this is the big boss. This is Secretary Granholm. And the administration continues to make addressing climate change a priority and has set rather ambitious goals for achieving this. 100% clean electricity by 2035 and net zero economy by 2050. The states and utilities are leading also with some of their own decarbonization initiatives. In the past 3.5 years, 11 states have passed legislation to fully decarbonize their electricity sector by 2050, or in some cases sooner. 3 of those states require 85 to 100% reductions in economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions. Over 30 US electric and gas utilities have pledged to reduce their CO2 emissions by similar amounts. We know from the modeling that's been done that we cannot meet these ambitious goals without clean, reliable power from nuclear energy. At the DOE's Office of Nuclear Energy, to address these challenges and to leverage nuclear energy's role in combating the climate crisis, there's 3 primary focus areas. One is supporting our existing light water reactor fleet, one of which you may be familiar with, Diablo Canyon, located here in California. Enabling the deployment of advanced nuclear reactors, and supporting developers like you'll hear from Mike Laufer from Kairos Power at the end of this session, and developing the advanced nuclear fuel cycles needed by these developers. Next slide, please. So our current landscape for nuclear energy in the US today is primarily our large existing plants that support distributed grids. However, nuclear energy provides half of our nation's annual clean energy electricity production. Our capacity factor for the nuclear fleet is 92%. This is the highest capacity factor for nuclear generation in the world, and it's also higher than any other generation source. This makes nuclear energy the largest and most reliable clean carbon-free electricity source for electricity on the grid today. As we transition to a lower carbon grid, the future energy landscape is expected to look very different. As shown here, a combination of our existing fleet and advanced nuclear reactors, coupled with fossil and energy and renewable sources, will not only produce electricity, but we also need to provide heat and electricity to decarbonize other sectors of the economy. So to meet these needs, there's dozens of US companies developing advanced reactor designs with a wide variety of capabilities. These newer technologies will be offered in a variety of sizes. You see here everything from micro to small to large. These designs will include light water reactor, advanced small modular reactors, as well as sodium, gas, and molten salt cooled reactors. These advanced technologies will be smaller, scalable, and operate flexibly to be good partners to renewables. Advanced reactors hold massive potential for decarbonization, not just in the power sector, but as you see here, for the production of clean hydrogen, for heating, desalination. And one of the challenges, if you've been investigating how to decarbonize the industrial processes and manufacturing will be some of the more challenging parts of the decarbonization equation. And this is where nuclear energy has a unique role to play. Next slide. So what does the build out potentially look like? To achieve these goals, you might ask why they can't be met with wind and solar alone. As penetration of renewables grows, issues with power generation variability, interconnection congestion, and transmission constraints increasingly necessitate the need for firm, reliable, zero carbon power generation sources. This is where nuclear is uniquely positioned to fill that gap. Most of the energy growth studies conclude that approximately 200 gigawatts needs to be added by 2050. So what does that scale up look like? If 2 gigawatts per year of industrial capacity can be added starting in the 2029 timeframe, and then looking at larger, ramping up to 13 gigawatts per year from 2035 from 2050, that's what the ramp looks like. This does sound hard, but it is something we have done in the past. Throughout the 70s and 80s, the US averaged 5 gigawatts per year of new nuclear capacity, with some years approaching 10 gigawatts. This is achievable. Next slide, please. To deliver 200 gigawatts of new nuclear by 2050, we will also require a workforce pipeline that can ramp up to 50,000 by 2030 and up to 300,000 by 2050. These jobs are not just engineering jobs. These include welders, electricians, pipe fitters, and other trades. The workforce expansion would build from existing cohorts of experienced labor while taking advantage of the fossil energy transition. And this is where energy justice really does come into play as we look at the clean energy transition. So if we take a moment to talk about the completion of Vogtle units 3 and 4 in Georgia. There's been a lot of criticism and concern regarding the project's cost and schedule overruns. However, it could also be said that the high upfront costs of this first of a kind nuclear project are a down payment on catalyzing our US nuclear sector. Much broader than the success of one plant, investing in Vogtle has laid the foundation to jumpstart the advanced nuclear industry, establishing supply chains and training a new generation of workers with the skills necessary to build future nuclear plants. These supply chain and workforce investments will enable not only the domestic production of nuclear power, but also support us taking the lead across the globe and exporting the US nuclear technology. Next slide. And to talk about the help from the federal level to support this kind of transition, 2 recently passed laws I'm sure you've heard about. They're quite large, but let's talk specifically about what is in these laws to support nuclear power. The bipartisan infrastructure law signed November 15th, 2021 included $62 billion for the DOE to help transition the US to a clean energy economy, leveraging the largest single source of clean power, nuclear energy. The bipartisan infrastructure law also included $6 billion to start what's the Civil Nuclear Credit Program. This is for our existing US reactors that can apply for certification or competitively bid on credits. I'm sorry, it's where owners and operators of commercial reactors can apply for certification to get credits for continued operations and avoid premature retirements. The DOE has its first applications in-house and are evaluating them right now for the first credits to be issued. There was also $8 billion dedicated to demonstrating regional clean hydrogen hubs. At least one hub will be dedicated to the production of hydrogen with nuclear energy. And finally, the bipartisan infrastructure law provided almost $2.5 billion to support the 2 advanced demonstration projects, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. The Inflation Reduction Act is the most significant piece of climate legislation in US history, with $369 billion in climate provisions. The IRA includes multiple incentives to pave the way for our nuclear energy sector to help ensure energy security and resilience and cut emissions by 40% before the end of the decade. The real game changer here is the production tax credit to help preserve the existing fleet of nuclear plants. The zero emission nuclear power production tax credit provides up to $15 per megawatt hour for the electricity produced by these plants. This credit, along with the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, will support our existing fleet and ensure that America maintains its largest source of clean power. The tax credit will also help ensure resilience by keeping the workforce, expertise, and supply chain ready and available as we bring advanced reactors online. The IRA also includes tax incentives for clean energy technologies, including advanced reactors. A technology neutral production tax credit of $25 per megawatt hour for the first 10 years of plant operation, or a 30% investment tax credit on new zero carbon power plants placed into operation in 2025 or after. Above and beyond these credits, new and existing reactors can also leverage the production tax credits for up to 10 years to generate clean hydrogen. The IRA also invested $700 million to support the development of a domestic supply chain for high-assay, low-enriched uranium, which is essential to support the wide-scale deployment of advanced reactors. Recent DOE analysis estimates that the clean energy provisions from IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law alone could reduce carbon emissions by 1 million metric tons as we drive technology innovation to enable longer-term emissions reductions across the industrial, transportation, and power sectors. Next slide, please. So let's get into some more specifics and talk about the advanced nuclear demonstrations that are underway. Next slide. The DOE is deeply invested in public-private partnerships with a range of nuclear developers to address the highest technical and regulatory risks for commercialization of the advanced reactor designs, specifically supporting 3 demonstration projects to deploy first-of-a-kind reactors on the grid by the end of this decade. These demonstration projects are critically important to resolve regulatory uncertainty and stimulate and establish the necessary supply chains for wide-scale deployment. In addition, we're also funding 5 risk reduction projects aimed at reducing risk and technical uncertainty for a broad range of advanced reactor designs. These projects include a variety of small modular reactors and microreactor designs, including Kairos Power's technology, which you'll hear about from Mike Laufer in a minute. Next slide, please. The carbon-free power project will result in the first commercial demonstration of the NuScale light water reactor-cooled small modular reactor at Idaho National Laboratory in 2029. The initial site characterization is already complete. This modular concept incorporates all of the components for steam generation and heat exchange into a single integrated unit called the NuScale Power Module. These modular reactors are being offered in 4, 6, and 12 module configurations. The carbon-free power project will demonstrate the 6-module configuration, with each module providing 77 megawatts electric with a total plant output of 462 megawatts electric. This plant will also use an air cooling option, which will reduce the water use by 95%. NuScale Voyager plant is the first ever SMR to receive the Nuclear Regulatory Commission design approval, and in doing so has achieved important wins for our advanced reactor industry. The Voyager plant is cleared to operate safely without the need for off-site power for safe shutdown and cooling. The modules safely shut down and self-cool indefinitely with no need for AC or DC power, operator or computer action, or additional water. Following a loss of off-site power, the plant can run in island mode, providing first responder power and black start from cold conditions. NRC has also accepted NuScale's methodology for setting the emergency planning zone at the site boundary, as compared to the 10-mile radius emergency planning zone for our existing fleets. The significance of the EPZ limited to the site boundary is that process heat off-takers, businesses, and housing can be sited in close proximity to these plants. Next slide, please. The Natrium reactor here, shown here, is a sodium-cooled fast reactor that's being demonstrated by TerraPower in partnership with GE Hitachi. This reactor will have a nominal electric output of 345 megawatts electric, but it also will have a molten salt thermal energy storage system, allowing the plant to ramp its electricity output from 100 megawatts electric to 500 megawatts electric over 5 hours, making this plant a price follower on the grid. This project will be sited at a retiring coal plant in the state of Wyoming, which is the top coal producing region in the United States. The Natrium reactor will be an energy powerhouse for Wyoming, taking advantage of the existing transmission infrastructure and keeping important jobs in the local community, and allowing and attracting industrial manufacturing to the region. The heat can also be paired with industrial use. TerraPower and their partner utility PacifiCorp have also recently announced plans to study the feasibility of deploying up to 5 additional Natrium reactors and integrated energy storage systems in the PacifiCorp territory by 2035. Next slide. The third demonstration project is the X-Energy project. It's a high temperature gas cooled reactor. It's a 4-module plant configuration, which will provide 320 megawatts electric. This plant is designed for flexible load following capacity to pair with renewables. The high outlet temperatures enable the production of very high temperature steam, which is ideal for hydrogen production, as well as process heat over a wide range of temperature industrial heat, high temperature industrial heat applications. In fact, Dow and X-Energy recently announced a collaboration with the intent to deploy an XE100 at one of Dow's US Gulf Coast site, which is expected to be operational by 2030. This reactor design will be fueled by TRISO particles, providing a robust safety profile. TRISO fuel is a coated particle form designed for safety and performance in high temperature reactors, fuel that cannot melt. X-Energy recently broke ground on a TRISO-X fuel fabrication facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It is the first commercial scale advanced nuclear fuel facility. It's worth repeating that all 3 of these demonstration plants are ideally sized to take advantage of the infrastructure and workforce of retiring coal plants, bringing energy security to regions seeking to transition away from fossil fuels. Next slide, please. Often the first question we get, whether nuclear energy is a responsible solution, is what about the spent fuel? Next slide. So let's put this in context. The amount of space spent fuel requires is not large. The total spent fuel produced by all US nuclear power plants to date roughly totals the same volume of waste produced by coal every hour. All commercial waste since 1950s would only cover a football field to the height of 10 yards. However, we do know that permanent geological repositories have proven politically controversial. To manage the nuclear waste challenge, the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future made several recommendations, including a consent-based approach to siting future nuclear waste management facilities and prompt efforts to develop one or more consolidated storage facilities. And that is why the DOE is developing an integrated waste disposal strategy with a focus on consent-based siting processes for siting federal facilities for the temporary consolidated storage of spent fuel. The first step in moving towards permanent disposal is to develop the framework for consent-based siting for this temporary consolidated storage. The DOE launched a funding opportunity announcement for community engagement on consent-based siting. The DOE is not currently soliciting volunteer sites to host consolidated interim storage as part of this funding opportunity, but they're hoping to encourage engagement and open dialogue and build capacity among interested stakeholders about the consent-based siting process. In recent years, consent-based siting has been successful in Sweden and Finland. Next slide, please. So what are we doing in the meantime? In the meantime, utilities are using dry storage to manage their spent fuel on site. Fuels that's removed from the reactor is stored in the pool, in pools of water for cooling. After a few years in the pool, the fuel has cooled and the radioactivity decreased enough to allow it to be removed. Moving spent fuel into dry casks frees up space in the pool to store spent fuel newly removed from the reactor. Dry casks, you can see here, they have a sealed metal cylinder to contain the spent fuel assemblies. And each canister is designed to hold anywhere from 2 to 6 dozen spent fuel assemblies. Water and air are removed and the canister is sealed with inert gas. It's either welded or bolted shut. In some designs, the casks are set vertically on a concrete pad, as you see here, or below grade. In other situations, they're placed horizontally. Dry cask storage is safe for people and the environment. They're designed to contain radiation, manage the heat, and prevent nuclear fission. They must resist earthquakes, projectiles, tornadoes, floods, temperature extremes, and other scenarios. The heat generated by a loaded spent fuel cask is typically less than is given off by a home heating system. The heat and radioactivity decrease over time without the need for fans or pumps, and the casks are under constant monitoring and surveillance. And you see here an installation on the right-hand side to give you an idea of how big they are relative to a human being. Next slide. I think that's the end. And that is the end of me channeling Alice. And if
yeah, that picture at the end, I wasn't sure if it was showing the size or is people actually hugging the containers.
It's also to show that you can hug a container if you want to. I realize maybe in this audience we have more people that hug trees. That's okay.
That's good. I think that was a great job channeling Alice and giving us the top-down perspective from the DOE. I think it's clear that from the U.S. energy point of view, there's a clear role going forward as part of the planning. There's a lot of time and effort being spent in pilots and moving this forward. I think one of the next questions then is how do we move from this national picture to what's going on at the state level? You mentioned consent-based permitting. In the end, a lot of this comes down to states allowing this as well. And when we get to the questions, maybe we could talk a little bit later about why it's taken so long to get some projects permitted, why Vogtle has taken so long. And just a reminder here, I haven't seen any questions yet. If you do have questions, please put them into the chat and we'll bring them up at the end. We want to leave plenty of time for everybody to ask questions. So I'm going to ask Christine 1 to leave and Christine 2 to come back and give us the perspective about one of the key roles here in nuclear is the transition away from coal. And as you saw where some of the pilots are going to be, they're going to be in big coal states, in some cases using coal sites for power. So there's a lot of things there, but really it's going to come down to some of the states. So Christine, too, if you could take us through some of that. And then we'll get to Mike at the end, who is quite actively providing one of these solutions with a technology, I believe, that wasn't mentioned yet. So we'll leave you hanging on the edge for that one.
Sounds good. So Johnny, if you could pull up my presentation. So my day job is not channeling Alice Caponetti, although that's fun. So I am the director for the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. And our focus really is to help those that are interested in new to nuclear or folks that are interested in nuclear technology understand the technology, understand what's going on today, and answer questions. I'm not here to tell you that nuclear is the right choice for you or your state. I want to be a conduit for kind of the technical platform by which you can make an informed decision about this. A little bit about me. This is my 30th year in nuclear power. It just seems like yesterday that I was doing outage work in Arizona on the Palo Verde generating station. But I've spent 27 of those years with the commercial fleet and only moving into the national labs a few years ago. And I decided to come into the national lab system primarily because I believe the national labs and the Department of Energy have an important role to play in ensuring that we have a smooth transition to a clean economy. And having some commercial experience helps me to, which is one of the main roles we have in GAIN, to support the public-private partnerships like we have with Kairos. So what I would like to do, let's go to the next slide. So just to give a little bit more flavor and do a direct comparison as to what this new fleet of reactors might look like. There's a variety of sizes ranging from 1.5 megawatts up to that 300 to 600 megawatt electric range. Today's fleets, our existing reactors are gigawatt scale, right? And a significant footprint in the communities that they're in. They are predominantly light water reactors. I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about the wide variety associated with the reactor technologies. And the reason it's important to have this wide variety of reactor technologies is it does help us in terms of the next 2 points, which is really being able to flexibly operate and dispatch these units differently than our baseload generation we have today. And instead of having active involvement in the safety systems, these designs take advantage of the physics and or engineering designs to have inherent or passive safety systems. Next slide, please. So there's different types of fission. On the left-hand side here, you see thermal, or the molten salt reactor has the ability to either operate in that thermal or fast fission capability. I talked earlier about NuScale as an advanced light water reactor option. X Energy is doing a high temperature reactor. And Kairos is going to talk about actually a hybrid between some of these technologies in terms of the molten salt variety. On the right-hand side, you see the fast fission, and you get a gas-cooled reactor, a sodium-cooled fast reactor, which is the Natrium project that I spoke of earlier. And some folks are looking also at lead-cooled fast reactors. All of these have different advantages. They have different operating profiles, different fuel cycles, so it gives end users the ability to choose the product that makes the most sense for their needs. And speaking of those needs, I'm going to come back to the slide. Next slide, please. I'm going to come back to this slide just to talk a little bit about as we move forward. I think it's very important for all of us that have been in the energy business. Most of us dedicate ourselves to one generation source or another. We have to come together as energy professionals and imagine what an integrated energy system can do and how we start to make these sources work with one another to ensure that we get the cleanest and most sustainable power and energy to support all of these activities at the bottom of the slide. So that does mean we're talking about not only the electricity, and electricity demand is going to grow as we decarbonize across many different sectors. We have to find clean process heat. And as energy storage comes on as well, that's going to be another shock absorber in our system that allows us to make the best use of all the clean energy sources available to us in the future. Next slide, please. Todd mentioned the transition away from coal. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in GAIN in particular. On the right-hand side is a representation of all the companies within the nuclear sector that are working to understand the nuances associated with potentially replacing the heat source in a coal station with a nuclear unit. And in particular, on the left-hand side, I'm going to talk just briefly about what we're doing in GAIN. So we have partnered with 3 non-nuclear utilities with retiring coal stations. And it was important to partner with a non-nuclear utility to understand what questions come up for someone that's not necessarily familiar with the technology. And and each one of these stations has a little bit of a different ownership model and different state level objectives in terms of decarbonization or industries that they're trying to support. Our first station is Coronado Generating Station in Arizona. And it's in that Four Corners region that you see there on the left-hand side of the chart. I'm actually leaving on Sunday to go to Kentucky. Kentucky I've been in engagement in Kentucky for over 18 months. This is not a state that has any state level decarbonization goals. So when you talk about a transition away from fossil fuel for them, it's about economic transformation. And this is where nuclear can be supportive to providing the clean energy that their industrial customers that are already in the state need, as well as giving their employees at these coal sites good paying jobs and preserving the tax revenue in those communities. The last station that we're working with is in Maryland. It's the Warrior Run station. Their utility has indicated that they want to be out of fossil fuels by 2025. And so we're looking to see what life for that particular station might look like going forward. We expect some results to be coming out of our Arizona study towards the end of the first quarter of 2023. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of what's going on across the United States, you can see here, and I apologize if anyone is colorblind, the blue and greens can sometimes be difficult. But you can see here the different state policies that have either been passed. In green and blue, there's many states that have policies under consideration. And you can also see the number of projects that are being considered. And going to the next slide. Just in 2022 alone, we saw a significant amount of state policies enacted associated with new nuclear, and they have a wide range. So you see some of them are about repealing moratoriums. Some of them have been around enabling specific projects, and others are around starting nuclear related small modular reactor studies or task forces to understand the role of nuclear and how it might play going forward. And the last slide is these are other state policies related to nuclear that were passed as well, but didn't necessarily, they're a little bit unique. And I will tell you, out of the Climate Solutions Now Act, Maryland has published a study looking that looks at if you were to transition away from fossil fuels, what would, using advanced nuclear, what would the LCOE look like? So that report has recently been published as well. And that is me channeling me. And I'm excited to turn it back over to Todd so that you guys can hear from Mike, who's actually day-to-day making this happen.
One, I guess, wide open question for you, Christine, is with so many things, there's various layers of government organizations. The NRC in this case, state level, and the same with EPA and other power plants. And there's always a discussion of who has enforcement power, who has final say. Is nuclear any different than conventional in that play between the national and state regulation and enforcement?
So what I encourage at a state level is for folks to really look at what you get from a nuclear regulatory review. So the developers in certifying their design, and also a utility or an end user getting a site license, there's a significant amount of work that goes into that. So a state would want to consider what else beyond what I would already get from that federal review do we need to do. I'll say in Wyoming, they took specific action to simplify what they did at a state level. They did not eliminate having a discussion at a state level in terms of where they cite these particular plants going forward, but they did want it to be a consolidated conversation. So they actually cleaned up some of their laws associated with consideration of building new nuclear.
Okay, and I'm sure, Mike, you've got some hands-on experience in trying to get things permitted, and you've probably addressed that. One general comment to everybody. We have questions coming up in two different windows here. One's in the webinar chat and one's in the Q&A window. I'd ask that we just keep things in the Q&A window just in one place. That would be pretty helpful. And Mike, when you're going through, as the CEO of a new company, Advanced Nuclear, I think you guys are about 6 years old. You're going through a lot of this, on the ground, learning how to get it all done. One question that's come up too is, what's the lifespan of one of your plants, and how is that going to compare to some of the existing plants that have been getting extensions in order just to keep the lights on in some places? So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, the CEO of Kairos Power, to tell us hands-on about one of the technologies out there.
Very good. Thank you, Todd. And thank you for the opportunity to join for this forum. I'm looking forward to the Q&A discussions. I'm sure it'll be a really good discussion. I have some slides. I'm going to try and be relatively efficient, but I'll start by, while those are coming up, I'll introduce myself, introduce Kairos as well, and kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of what our strategies are and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to do differently, I would say, from conventional nuclear development to date. So my personal background is engineering, mechanical and nuclear engineering. I've been working on the technology that Kairos is trying to commercialize for about 15 years now. The first stint of that was at UC Berkeley. And so a lot of that work was done through kind of relatively small university programs supported by the Department of Energy. And so I think it's important to note that Kairos as it exists is coming out of both kind of the university system in California, but also as kind of early investments from DOE. And where we are today is an important product of that. And I think it's important to recognize that, and it has an impact kind of in terms of both the nature of the project coming out of UC Berkeley, as well as kind of, I would say, the younger generation of many students and researchers who are working on the project over the course of a decade. In that context, I think approach nuclear and the challenges and opportunities of nuclear in kind of a different way. And I think in our generation, we see the importance of nuclear really as a clean energy source, and both from the perspective of being able to eliminate fossil fuels and the direct air pollution that comes from it, and that has real health consequences across many different populations across the world. And the elimination of those direct emissions and pollutants has real tangible benefits. And then there's kind of the more kind of harder to get a hand on, but obviously the benefits of carbon-free emissions. And I think in looking forward to kind of what is going to be the role of nuclear or advanced nuclear in fighting climate change, I'm dealing with this every day in terms of understanding what the challenges are for getting these technologies built, and understanding what it's going to take to get there, but also coming at it from the belief that if we don't have really clean and affordable nuclear power at our disposal, solving basically the climate crisis gets dramatically harder. And we really need every tool that we have in our arsenal. And Kairos is motivated every day to try and make sure that nuclear can play a responsible role in solving the climate crisis. And if we can, it will make solving that crisis easier. And that's a huge need that we see. So I'll go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So the next slide. So Kairos, I'll talk a little bit about the company in the next slide, but we are a mission-driven company. Our mission is to enable the world's transition to clean energy with the ultimate goal of dramatically improving people's quality of life while protecting the environment. And please advance the next animation. So what are we prioritizing in terms of trying to get there? So in order to achieve this mission, we are really focused on trying to develop a clean energy technology which has two key characteristics, one that is affordable and one that is safe. These are the characteristics that we believe are fundamentally important for technology which is going to be scalable. And if we are not able to provide technology which provides for both of these, then we're not going to have something that can scale. And the scale and magnitude of the climate crisis is so large that anything that can't become a major source of energy in the system is not really going to move the needle in terms of what the impact is on our climate broadly. I will say that embedded in the mission are, I would say, another kind of core tenet for Kairos, which is responsibility. So improving people's quality of life is connected to both the elimination of emissions, both carbon as well as other pollutants, as well as providing access to energy, which is a really key corollary for quality of life throughout the world. And then that tenet of protecting the environment really is essential as well. And that rolls into a number of kind of key beliefs around doing this responsibly, both in our development program as well as in the future deployment of our technology. So go to the next slide, please. So this is a quick snapshot of Kairos and what we're doing. I'm going to talk a few aspects about the business strategy, very little about the technology, and a little bit about our development approach. So we are a relatively new company. We're only about 6 years old, founded in 2016, coming about really out of about a decade's worth of work. I was at UC Berkeley. We're working with other partners at MIT, University of Wisconsin, and University of Mexico in that time period. Kairos emerged out of that research effort really to figure out how to commercialize a technology that we saw a huge amount of potential in. We're an engineering, design, manufacturing company, so we're doing a lot of things, and we are focused on one reactor technology. I'll talk about that. Christine did mention it when she was channeling Alice. But we're a little bit of an interesting combination of different nuclear technologies, and that actually gives us some really important opportunities both on kind of the cost and the safety side. We're growing at a healthy clip. We're about 320 employees today, and I'll talk a little bit about our footprint and the infrastructure that we're building to get there. This crisis is going to require building a lot, whether it's nuclear, renewables, or other. There's going to be a lot of build that's required, and I think that's going to require a lot of new infrastructure. Christine also spoke about that in terms of the jobs as well for the macro problem. We are taking a new approach to nuclear development. I will say that it is highly informed by the success of SpaceX, primarily from the perspective of their ability to reduce cost and demonstrate reliability. The key aspects there are iterative hardware demonstrations, and I'll talk about some of those hardware demonstrations. We have a lot of non-nuclear technology development that we're doing. That's key for moving faster at lower cost and lower risk. And we're combining that with a substantial investment in in-house manufacturing capabilities and vertical integration. And we really believe these are core aspects of what it's going to take to achieve disruptive cost reduction and provide cost certainty. And I'd say there are many different facets of the debate about what our future plans for deployment of nuclear power should look like. The biggest barrier about, and frankly, why nuclear is not going to play a significant role this decade, and why we're talking about the 2030s, is because of cost. And so if it's my core belief that our ability to fight the climate crisis is much easier if we have nuclear as an option that we can deploy responsibly, and that's going to require us to really address the biggest hurdle, which is cost. Our cost targets are set to be competitive with natural gas in the U.S. electricity market. That's a very aggressive cost target, but our goal is to be the most affordable source of dispatchable carbon-free energy, period. We don't want to depend on market conditions to change to put prices on carbon, so natural gas is our target. And then the last bullet, we are driven by a schedule to have U.S. demonstration by the end of this decade, really to be ready in time for a deployment ramp in the 2030s. And I'll talk a little bit more about our infrastructure facilities, and there's some pictures of the Kairos team there on the right side. All right, next slide, please. So this is, but before I talk about our specific strategy and our technology, I think it's important to talk about the commercial driver here, because it's a core belief of mine that any new technology that's trying to penetrate into the energy markets is going to have a strong commercial basis and a market opportunity to motivate that deployment. This is the basis of what we think is the key opportunity for us. And I'll also point out, I think that this also is an important recognition about what we have. We have a lot of infrastructure, and in recognizing that there is going to be what I view as a singular opportunity to change our energy system emerging based on what we have today. So the origin of the name Kairos, it comes from ancient Greek, meaning the right or opportune moment. And this figure is from the Energy Information Agency. It's a little bit dated, but the general trends have not changed significantly. And this was kind of the key data that kind of spawned a lot of the Kairos commercial strategy. This is the distribution of US electricity generation, basically when the generation came online, when it started up, and by fuel type. The major changes, there's a little bit less coal because we've been retiring coal plants, which I think is an absolutely a really good thing for a variety of reasons. And there's also been a lot of renewable growth post 2010 in this. So those are the kind of the changes. But the big standout feature on this, in my view, is that huge spike between 2000 and 2005, where we built out about 200 gigawatts of natural gas capacity. For reference, the US nuclear fleet provides, it's a little bit less than 100 gigawatts of capacity, provides just about 20% of our electricity today. So we built out twice that capacity in just 5 years. This was followed by essentially collapse of natural gas prices. And for all intents and purposes, this has been kind of the dominant story of the evolution of the US energy market over the last 20 years. This has been the dominant factor that's been pushing out coal, primarily on an economic basis. It's also pushing out marginal nuclear plants, either older units or single unit plants that have higher marginal costs and can't compete. So this is kind of the landscape. Getting coal out of the system is undoubtedly a good thing. The other corollary is that as renewable prices have dropped, it basically is setting up a system which I think utilities are generally comfortable with, which is they can balance the variable renewables with natural gas, and it kind of that provides them with a model about how they can operate their grids. The key challenge is how are we going to get that natural gas out of the system? And I think no matter kind of what your perspective or preference about what's going to happen in the future energy system, we're going to build out a lot of renewables in the next decade. I think that's going to be a really good thing. But in order to finish the effort for decarbonization, we're going to need to deploy a lot of new infrastructure. To rough order 20-30% of our energy system is going to have to come from a new technology that doesn't exist at substantial commercial scale today. And that's key. It's going to have to be dispatchable, and it's going to have to be affordable. And nuclear can fill that role. And I say can, it's not predestined, but our best shot of decarbonization is to have as many opportunities to fill that opportunity as we can. I think the challenge is going to be much easier if nuclear can play a role there, and Kairos is committed to making sure that we can provide a solution which is affordable to help in that opportunity that we see. All right, next slide, please. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the technology. Christine actually already talked about our fuel. This coated particle fuel. These are like poppy seed-sized particles of fuel. The key thing is that all of those coating layers, which you can see on the micrograph image on the left side, that essentially serves as the containment for the fission products that are generated from the nuclear reaction. And that happens at very small scale. And this fuel is basically the most robust fuel that's ever been developed. It was developed for reactors that go to very high temperature that Christine discussed. In our case, we're somewhat different in that we're combining it with low pressure, high temperature salt coolants. In this case, we're using a fluoride salt called FLiBe, which is lithium fluoride, beryllium fluoride. This was developed historically for reactors that had uranium dissolved in the fuel. Our salt is clean. It doesn't have uranium dissolved in it. And instead, it really provides a really important backup barrier for the fuel. And actually, the key thing about the technology basis here is that the combination of this fuel and this coolant provides incredibly robust intrinsic safety. So our safety case is really about maintaining the fuel in this coolant. And as long as we maintain that configuration of the system, there is no scenario where we can fail fuel and release anything into either the plant or the environment. So that fundamental safety case comes from the technology. The key thing for us is that it actually reduces the number of systems in the plant that are going to be important for ensuring safety. And that allows us to be more innovative as we get away from the reactor system in order to basically drive down costs and be more innovative in those systems without affecting the fundamental safety of the plant. So this is kind of key. Safety and cost are very closely linked for us. It's a major driver of why we've been engaging with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for a number of years. And I'll talk a little bit about our progress there. but safety and cost are really intimately linked for our system, and they're both really important. I'll talk about the next slide. I talked a little bit right now. When we look at the commercial landscape, the biggest barrier for new nuclear in the commercial world is cost, but it's not just cost, it's also cost certainty. This is kind of a quick summary about what Kairos is doing. And as I said, if nuclear is going to play a significant role in our efforts to decarbonize, and it's my core belief that the availability of safe and affordable nuclear makes that vastly easier to tackle. This is what it's going to take to get there. So Kairos is active in all these areas. We have design programs, engineering, testing programs and development, licensing efforts, and then there was mentions to fuel chain, and I talked about our in-house manufacturing. We also have early iterations for developing both the ability to produce the fuel and the salt, as they're kind of the key aspects of our technology. Now, the combination of all of this produces a set of certainties: technology certainty, licensing certainty, supply chain certainty, and build certainty. And the product of each of these is actually true cost certainty in terms of how much money it's going to cost to deploy the technology and how much it's going to cost to operate it. It's also going to provide data on how much it's going to cost to decommission and be responsible at the end of life, as well as how to manage the spent fuel. So all of that is embedded in here. And I'll talk in 2 slides a little bit about kind of our some of our strategies to get there. So next slide, please. So this is kind of a snapshot about Kairos's infrastructure and our footprint. We're trying to build power plants. That's our ambition. That's going to require a lot of infrastructure, and essentially, since our technology is different and we're trying to do it in a new way relative to the costs that are built into the existing nuclear world, it's going to require new infrastructure. So our headquarters, we're here in Alameda. That's where I am today. We have several lab facilities here. We're working on all non-nuclear kind of rapid iteration testing at smaller scale in this facility. We have a development facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're doing larger scale non-nuclear tests in that facility, as well as standing up a substantial amount of our production infrastructure. We have a number of smaller facilities and partnerships, but the other important site to point out here is the site in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is the site where the Hermes reactor will be. This is going to be a low power demonstration reactor that we're working to build, and I'll talk a little bit about the progress for that facility. I'll make a note here about, I think it connects to the mission, but I know that environmental justice is an increasingly important issue in the energy landscape, and it connects into the need for clean energy and doing so in a responsible way. I would say I think that the tenets of environmental justice are really actually deeply embedded in Kairos, not just in words, but also in action. So the components about improving quality of life, protecting the environment, really, I think, instills a sense of responsibility that's really embedded in the mission. But I think also in terms of how we're developing our infrastructure, there are a couple of things that factor in here. One is we're using mostly brownfield sites. So we're going to locations where there already was some past infrastructure. And we think that that's a more responsible thing to do in terms of the impact of us on the local environments. And then we really have been putting a strong effort into community engagement, making sure that we are, the community is aware of what we're doing. We're transparent, and building that strong connection to local community is really key. And I think that's kind of the key in terms of making sure that whatever gets built, and we're going to have to build a lot of things in order to fight climate crisis, and it needs to be done with the full knowledge and support of the local communities where those things are being built. And we're doing that. Kairos is doing that today through all of our sites with all the local communities. That includes a lot of tribal engagement in New Mexico as well. And so those are the types of experiences that are going to be necessary to build support for all of the new infrastructure that's going to be needed, not just nuclear, for the energy transition. All right, next slide. One of the key things that I think is different about Kairos's development strategy, and I won't dwell on this too much, is we very much have an iterative development process which is focused on demonstrating our technology with real hardware. And I would say that in terms of how we're doing that, we're doing it with a combination of non-nuclear demonstrations and nuclear demonstrations. And we're doing it at smaller scale before we go to bigger scale. And it's one of our beliefs that this is both a good strategy in terms of being able to move quickly, but it's also a responsible strategy in terms of limiting our impact and not scaling up the risks that we haven't really fully accounted for, and that this process is really going to be important. So these are our biggest loops. We operate with iterative development at many different levels. We're building a series of non-nuclear, we call them engineering test units. They're all non-nuclear. I'll show you the first one that's basically complete right now in Albuquerque. These are all supporting the development of the Hermes reactor. Christine did talk about that. And then we will be scaling up to our commercial product, but we're doing it with a non-nuclear demonstration facility, the U facility, and then the commercial demonstration, which I talked about, which our goal is to deploy by the end of this decade, we call KPX. And nominally, that plant would be 140 megawatts per unit. And so recognizing also the scale that's going to be necessary in terms of building a large number of reactors to fill kind of the role or the need in terms of the overall energy system needs. All right, last two slides I'll touch on briefly, and I'm looking forward to the questions. So Kairos is not just developing plans or paper products. We're actually building real hardware systems to understand what it's going to take to build these systems. So this is the first engineering test unit located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is a non-nuclear demonstration facility, but actually has a lot of overlap with a lot of the systems, or most of the systems that would be required for the operation of the actual Hermes reactor. The main difference is we're not rejecting heat since this is not generating nuclear heat. And then we don't have different requirements in the structures in terms of shielding, since there's no radiation in this environment. But this gives us the ability to understand what it's going to take to build the systems, what the cost is going to be. On the right side, we've gained practical experience assembling. We have graphite blocks. We've manufactured many of those, and we'll be manufacturing all of them in our systems. The pebbles in the system we've set up manufacturing for, and then operations. We're expecting to load salt into the system later this spring. And then the last slide is a quick summary about where we are heading for the Hermes reactor I alluded to. So this will be located in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It's actually going to be a brownfield site, which is where uranium enrichment was previously done as part of the Manhattan Project. And so we're taking a brownfield site that DOE has cleaned up, essentially. So we're reusing that facility. And the objective of this is really to prove our ability to deliver low-cost nuclear heat and provide cost certainty. We're on track for operations in 2026, and a few major accomplishments. We were selected in late 2020 for a substantial DOE award, about $300 million, to support the project in cost share. Kairos is covering more than 50% of this project cost. So I'd say this is a primarily privately funded effort, but with some federal support. And the order there is hundreds of millions in terms of the project, and compared to the billions of the demonstration problem. So we're a smaller scale project. We kind of acquired and did due diligence on the site in pretty short order. We acquired the site in summer of 2021. We submitted the construction permit for the reactor to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in November 2021. And I'll say that review has gone very, very well. It's been a really productive back and forth with the NRC. Essentially, the technical review of the application is complete. They issued the draft environmental impact statement and ran a public meeting in Oak Ridge this past fall. And I'd say if everything stays on track, we should be getting the construction permit hopefully late this year, if not early next year. So I hope I didn't just paint too big of a target on us, but I would say with pretty good confidence that Kairos is going to be the first developer to actually bring a new advanced reactor online, and we're on track to do that. And I'm happy to engage in the discussion and questions. I think it'll be really good. Actually, I have one coda point which I maybe want to make. So, I think in looking at the challenges that we face now in terms of climate change, and also in kind of in contrast to the historical efforts of kind of fighting for environmental causes, I think there's something that's fundamentally different. And I think it's a good thing to discuss and debate, which is that historically, a lot of the benefit for the environment and the public has been to slow down projects, and if a project was not responsible, to ultimately prevent it from being done in the first place. The solution to climate change is a little bit different. It's going to require us to build a lot of things, and that's just a fundamentally different thing. And right now we've got to build a lot of something to replace natural gas. It can be renewables, it can be nuclear. Any of those systems is going to require challenging things for us to build. The transmission lines are not easy on renewables. The permitting for nuclear is not easy. There's all these challenges in place, but to get out of this crisis is going to require kind of a different perspective, and one that's going to actually be enabling for the technologies that we want to build to be deployed. I think that's kind of an important fundamental point. I don't have all the answers about what that's going to be, but I think it's good to point out that is kind of the needs have changed in terms of what's important to protect the environment, and that for addressing climate change, protecting the environment is going to require us to build new things. Now, we can argue about what those things will be, but that's going to be absolutely necessary. And figuring out how to do that at large scale quickly is going to be a really big challenge. So now I'll get off that soapbox and looking forward.
No, I'll come back to it in a second, but there are a couple of specific questions for you. One, once you build a plant, what's the expected life cycle of your plant, and how does that compare to the traditional nuclear plants out there? Because I know they're being extended to 60 years or 80 years. What's the expected life cycle of your plant? Yeah, so I'll answer very briefly. It's not a simple question. The Hermes reactor will have an operational lifetime of initial operational life of just 4 years. And a lot of that is driven by our ability to move quickly. We will have to produce data on materials. Those testing programs are pretty extensive and expensive to run. So we want to work on data that we have now while we build out more data to support longer lifetimes. So that's a relatively short life. For our commercial reactors, we're planning for a lifetime for major components of 20 years, but we're planning for those components to be replaceable. So the lifetime of the plant could be extended in kind of roughly 20-year intervals. And so, the economics about when it would be, how many of those intervals you'd want to do. So, I would expect at least one major replacement. So, 40 to 60 years. But in our case, we would expect to replace major components to extend the life of the plant, which is a little bit different from the current plants, which have to justify the extension of life with many of the components that they can't replace. So a very specific question that popped up was about the fleet. Is it natural assay lithium or is it enriched? We require it's a pretty interesting question. So we do require enriched lithium 7, which is important to note. So the proliferation risks are not the same as enriching the other direction. Kairos is working to develop that capability, and that's one of the parts of the process that we've been working on developing in-house capabilities for that production. So then, I guess, sort of back to your soapbox point for a minute. Like you said, there's been a lot of new technologies built. Coal got built, gets put, gas comes in, get built. There's always learnings happening along the way. It's the same with renewables. Wind turbines are built. Now we're trying to figure out what to do with the blades because it's a lot of fiberglass that has to be recycled. Solar panels wear out. They have to be recycled. We're still trying to figure that out as well. I think in general, one of the things about the nuclear industry is there's a lot more data. There's a lot more understanding, modeling, then we have a lot more computational power going forward. But correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe Christine, you could step in on this. From my perspective, it seems like the amount of scrutiny that the nuclear industry gets compared to everything else is a lot more detailed. There's a lot more, as you mentioned, Mike, analysis into the planning, the risk analysis, decommissioning, waste management. There's a lot more scrutiny than there ever has been on coal plants, for example. And Christine, you've been in the industry for a long time. Would you think that's a true statement?
That is a true statement, and it comes from a respect of the technology and the capability of the technology itself. You know, this is not the first time that we're looking at these types of reactors. Back 40, 50 years ago, we built demonstration units of many of these types of reactors and operated these units. So we have that data to share with the developers today. One of the bigger differences, though, is just like we've seen our phone and our computers emerge, they have the advantage also of the digital revolution as they design these new plants. Now, the difference in terms of responsibilities, from day one of operating a nuclear plant, you are responsible for investing in your decommissioning fund, such that and you are not allowed to touch that money until you decide that you have operated the plant as long as you need to or want to, and then that money becomes available to returning the site either to a brownfield site or a greenfield site, depending upon the discussions with the state and local needs. Nuclear is one of is the only technology that has liability for its waste forever. Okay, and this is not something that owners are allowed to leave behind. Currently, it is stored on site. The DOE has a responsibility with the existing fleet to consolidate that storage. I'm actually looking forward to the potential of recycling the existing fuel in the future, which would reduce the amount of waste that we have and also fuel this new fleet of reactors. All of this, though, and Mike is right, I spend a lot of time just trying to think outside of nuclear and think as an energy professional. The transition to a clean economy is going to require a significant amount of building. And just as an engineer, preserving the infrastructure where we can is going to make it possible for us to actually do this. So looking at smart transitions of natural gas and coal is an important part of any of this transition, and partnering the technologies together, which is not something that we did in the original design of our energy system.
Good, and I think, you know, one of the other things that's happening with the newer versions is that having huge, large singular plants, one of the advantages, smaller module and distributed. And I know we are trying to take advantage of existing infrastructure, but sometimes we need to look at things differently. We have wildfires, we have storms, it impacts transmission. I think, you know, some of the things about black start being self-sufficient and distributed, there's a lot of advantages from SMR that we don't have from previous versions of nuclear.
The ability to build close to load and behind the grid, I think, is an exciting opportunity that we have. And it's not just with nuclear. You can think about that in terms of batteries as well. You know, it does offer a different view and opportunity around energy independence. I've spent a little bit of time with the state of Alaska. You know, the largest transmission connections they have is only 300 megawatts, right? So they're never going to have any large single unit capability in Alaska. The amount of money, though, that they spend for backup diesel is a phenomenal cost to the state of Alaska. So could you imagine having a small reactor that the shutdown, so if it loses offsite power, the fail-safe is on, not off, the fail-safe is on. And having that available to those remote communities, it could really change and think about the money that gets freed up then in those communities where they're not having the transportation of the diesel and those types of things. There's a lot of interesting opportunities. I'm sure Mike, I don't know what he's going to reveal relative to his real business plans, but maybe he'll share a little bit.
So I think the Christine had mentioned it, and one of the advantages of kind of the newer kind of generation of technologies, or one of the, I'll say, this is all potential, right? Because it's our responsibility to prove this out. The safety profiles of the system are very different than the large conventional reactors that we have operating today, and the ability to essentially minimize or eliminate the impact on the surrounding community, I think is really important for both in real terms, in terms of substantially lower risk, in terms of but also probably more importantly in terms of impact in terms of the surrounding community. So I don't think we're going to dive into public acceptance, but not having to do annual emergency planning drills is really important for gaining acceptance of the local community. If you live nearby a nuclear power plant, the communities around nuclear power plants tend to be very supportive of those plants because they understand them and what they bring. But doing an annual drill that say, hey, this accident could happen and these are the things that we have to do, kind of is not very good for local community engagement. So making sure that you don't have to do any of that with the public is really important. That said, I think my model for community engagement is we want the community to know we're there. Because the appearance of hiding anything is the worst thing we can do for public relations. So we have to be transparent about what we're doing. But then actually what we're doing, we should not be in their conscious, right? So nothing controversial, no accidents, but being totally transparent about what we're doing. That's the model for building public trust with the communities. Our technology, and I like a lot of aspects of our technology. We're not unique in this respect in terms of the impact on the local communities, but that's really going to be necessary. And I'll say in terms of sizing, our goal is to basically go in and replace the fossil infrastructure. So if we look at kind of the sizing of there are smaller markets where there are different cost constraints, but again, we're interested in scale. Most of those fossil plants that are going to be opportunities for new clean energy generation are 500 to 700 megawatts combined cycle sites. Those are the sites that we want to be able to have as being viable sites for us. And as I said, our goal is to be part of the solution for how we're going to get natural gas out of the system for decarbonization. So being able to use their sites is part of that, and eliminating the emissions from those sites, not just the carbon, but also the other pollutants in those sites is a real benefit to the local communities around those plants.
Yeah, and to play on Albert Einstein, innovation is the opposite of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. And I think what we're seeing here is innovation. That's my background. But it's a constant innovation of new materials, new process, better ways of communicating with the community around. It's not hiding anything. It's being transparent. It's safety procedures, policies. It's things learning from the past and doing things better to move forward. All in the face of the fact that everything else we've been doing isn't helping the climate. Part of it's mitigation and part of it's resilience. And mitigation means putting less emissions out. Resilience is creating something that's going to withstand a changing climate. And I think one of the other advantages back to distribution and the way these are designed is they are significantly more resilient than previous technologies as well.
Absolutely. And I think what is refreshing about the developers and their approach today is that there is a variety, and they're trying to think ahead in terms of what a new energy system might look like. It probably is not going to look like the type of system that we have today. And we may value different aspects of a system going forward. For example, in Colorado, I think they're introducing legislation. Colorado has been very much a renewable portfolio standard state, and they're introducing legislation to be technology agnostic and to value clean, firm power and identify the performance characteristics that they're after. So if we really focus on not necessarily marrying a particular technology, but talking about what our energy system needs to give us in the future and what our expectations are, I think we'll not only end up with a better energy system at the end, but also supportive policy associated with that. I think that's why I'm excited to see, especially at the federal level with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, we're talking about clean energy credits, right? We're not talking about specific technologies. And I think that's an important thing. The one thing I've learned in engaging across the states is when you know one state, you know one state. Everybody's resources are different. Everybody's goals are different. And the best thing that we can do as energy professionals is provide a variety of products to choose from as you build your energy system going forward.
So at the risk of stirring the pot here, there have been a lot of declarations and statements and very few actual questions. So in the last couple of minutes here, I will see if there are questions that Mike and Christine can answer. Nothing is completely without impact. There's comments about risk and impact and everything else. Wind, solar, everything is mined, everything has to be moved, a lot of things. As a community, there's an effort to have less of an impact, to be more resilient, to be more reliable. If anybody here has a perfect solution, now's a great time to speak up, because it would be great. I think with so many things we do, it's iteration, it's improving and getting better and doing it faster. And SMR is an example of that. It is an evolution, it is iteration, it is moving faster, and it's better than what we've had in the past. So if there are questions about that, somebody would like to ask them, we have probably 2 minutes left. Please chime in and we'll see if we can answer in the next couple of minutes. I think one question was, can you share the environmental report on Hermes permit? Is that publicly available?
Yeah, I'm just posting the link to the NRC documentation, which includes our preliminary safe analysis report, the environmental report, and all the back and forth, as well as the draft environmental impact statement. So
and I know that went in the Q&A. I don't know if that went out to everybody. If not, maybe putting it back in the chat so everybody else has access to that would be good.
Okay, I can do that.
And Todd, one of the things that we're doing in GAIN is curating information across the industry from NGOs as well. That nuclear, like any other high technology, has its own jargon and acronyms and things that can make it inaccessible to understand. But we've been curating sources that help to explain this technology in real English. And so if that's helpful to this community, and you might want to think about what that looks like going forward, we'd be more than, to educate yourself on the different technologies, we'd be more than happy to share that information and, potentially come back with others and talk in more detail about it. I'm a nuclear enthusiast. That doesn't mean that others have to be either, but I do think my personal goal is to make the technology accessible and understandable to support local decision making.
Christine, there's one question that's popped up a couple of times about the Price-Anderson Act, and I don't know anything about it. Is there a quick answer, or is it a complicated answer about liability and limits?
So Price-Anderson is the backstop to the nuclear industry. Each licensee is required to insure their facility, and there's a couple of different insurance agencies that you can insure your facility. But the Price-Anderson Act is basically the federal level backstop for any major liability.
And I'm sure, Mike, that's part of your calculations. You talked about all of your modeling, future costs, decommissioning, all these types of things that come into getting into the market.
So I mean, I think this is like walking into a little bit of a landmine field.
It's a complicated issue, yeah.
So you know what?
So, I mean, I think it's an important question, right? Who bears the liability for the plants? And like that is a real issue. I would say, like, well, I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I'm going to speak for me. In my view, the way that I think the current nuclear fleet thinks about risk is vastly, they're forced to think about risk in a way that is much more comprehensive and in-depth than virtually any other large-scale industrial practice, which doesn't mean that there's not risk, but it's something that I think is not recognized. And everything that we do has risks, and that doesn't mean that you should ignore the risks. That's not an excuse for risks that are extreme, but like every system is going to have risks and benefits that are not financially, not something that you can calculate. I think that's true. I think the risk profile for our technology, which is, I'm going to speak for us, is vastly different in terms of impact. We don't have accident scenarios, so actually I'm going to zoom back. I think one of the major lessons from, I would say, the major nuclear accidents that we've had, and I'll count 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima as the major accidents, is that the nuclear world tends to focus on dose and release of radioactive material and contamination to people as kind of the primary figure of merit in terms of what the consequences are. And I would say, I'm not going to talk about Chernobyl because that was a different type of government regime. But I think when you look at kind of the US and 3 Mile Island and Japan and Fukushima, from the perspective of dose consequences, the safety record of the nuclear industry has been very high, exceptionally high. Like major industrial accidents with no measurable health consequences to the public is, I think, a positive, like that's a successful safety record from that perspective. What was missed was the impact of land contamination, right? So that was not a figure of merit prior to the Fukushima impact. And that's been a real consequence of that accident. And, looking at risk in perspective, the nuclear accident is significant in Fukushima. The consequences of the tsunami itself and the earthquake were vastly larger. So how do you weigh the consequences of those two disasters in the balance? So I think the philosophy for us is eliminate the scenarios where you're going to have both offsite dose consequences for the public and offsite contamination issues for any accident sequence. Keep everything basically enveloped in the plant and actually get the incentives of the operator completely aligned with that, which is these are assets that they want to protect the investment for. And so Kairos's philosophy is we want to have complete alignment with everything that the operator needs to do to be responsible to protect the investment, protect the plant operators is really important as well. That should be entirely consistent with everything that we're doing to protect the public. And that includes the whole scope of risks around the facility. And so that kind of is maybe a longer way of looking at it, but I don't think so. For us, the risk profile of the system is fundamentally different, and essentially, it's up to us to provide the data and the analysis that supports that safety case. That's a large portion about what the NRC is reviewing when they're reviewing our applications. And
so, Mike, I'm going to jump in because
I'm going on a little bit more here, but it's a complicated issue. I don't want to get it's not my role to talk about insurance and risks for the existing fleet. But I think the safety record in terms of dose consequence for reactors in the US is phenomenal. And I think that has to be kind of recognized, that what the benefit of carbon emissions avoided and air pollution avoided from the counterfactual, those aren't monetized as well, right? So there's things that are this is a very tough balance to do. It's going to come down to personal beliefs and value judgments, and everyone's going to come to kind of different conclusions on that. But there's a range of perspectives on this.
So I'm going to jump in because we're a few minutes over. We need to turn over. Just to summarize 2 key points, I think. One is innovation versus insanity, figuring out how to do things differently. and the fact this is probably one of the most scrutinized parts of the energy industry. There are a lot of people looking at it, there's a lot of detail being paid to, and it's not just wandering off on its own. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Christine. It's an important part in decarbonization and moving forward. There's always going to be opinions to be dealt with. And I just think we need to keep moving forward. So I'm going to turn it back over to Howard for the other two sessions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you, Christine and Mike, for joining us today. Great discussion. A number of comments being made about this being very provocative, and we did that on purpose. We wanted to add a topic this year to our sessions that was provocative and insightful. And, you know, with the premise this year being solutions to solve our climate crisis need to be rigorously examined, impacts addressed, and implemented quickly if possible. But a little disclaimer, you know, PCL is not, we're not taking a formal position on any of the topics we conclude in our assembly unless stated otherwise, which you'll hear in one of our next sessions that we are. But we want a variety of ideas presented and discussed from everyone's edification. We're sorry we missed our agency representative there, but we know that there are going to be a lot of concerns and questions with this one, and that's one of the reasons why we included it. We need to have all of the above approach when dealing with the climate crisis. I couldn't agree with Mike more that, you know, nothing out there is impact free. And so we've got to do everything we can to reduce the impacts. Those of us that deal with this on a policy level at the state and at the national level need to work our butts off over the next short period of time to make this happen. I'm not saying nuclear, I'm saying solving our climate crisis and our energy supply needs. And we had an offshore wind panel last week that is also controversial, but you know, we need to take a look at all these other solutions that are not fossil. So I appreciate everyone's interest and concerns and remarks. And this is just the beginning of a very lengthy conversation. And we wanted to be provocative. So I guess we met that goal. Yes.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for joining us this first session. We're going